Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Kabir Considers. In this video, we're going to react to It Has Begun, the 10 fastest collapsing countries. So there definitely seems to be some kind of, economic turmoil. Not just economic, but it just seems like there's a lot of countries on edge. There's a lot of conflicts going on. And obviously some are situations are developing quicker than others. Like the Middle East, I don't think anybody needs any reminders as to what's going on over there. Obviously, you've got the Russia-Ukraine thing. You've got situations in Africa, like in the Congo. You've got, uprisings happening in Europe. It's just happening all over the place. And it's just, I think it's good to sort of keep appraised of these situations, like just in case you're planning a holiday into one of these areas.
Welcome to the Geopolitical Hunger Games. Today we're taking a Welcome to the Geopolitical Hunger Games. Today we're taking a first-class ticket on the Meltdown Express to explore the top 10 countries that are free-falling faster than my willpower near a pizza buffet. From economies imploding like a bad souffle to governments crumbling under the weight of their own genius ideas, this list has it all. Grab your popcorn because these nations are making history in the how not to run a country category. Just a heads up on this, I had France on the list at number 3, all recorded and ready to go, but I woke up this morning and it already happened. Their government collapsed. So today we're looking at the countries that are more than likely going to collapse in the next few years. Got it? Get it? Good. Let's take a look.
Venezuela.
Number 10, Venezuela. Oh, Venezuela, the land of rapes, Angel Falls, and crippling hyperinflation. Once one of the wealthiest countries in Latin America, it's now a cautionary tale for how not to run an oil-rich nation. Life in Venezuela is like a never-ending Black Friday sale, except the shelves are empty and you're trading cigarettes for toilet paper. The minimum wage is so low it's practically a dare, and yet somehow people still manage to dance the salsa and crack jokes. If resilience was a sport, Venezuelans would take gold every single time. Why the collapse? Years of economic mismanagement, corruption, and an over-reliance on oil have left the country teetering. Add in a government that treats democracy like a distant cousin they don't talk to anymore, and you've got a full-blown disaster. So their president, Maduro, he's a piece of work. The government is collapsing, the economy is trash, the people are on really bad shape. He decides to release a video of servants serving him big meals with his family and smoking a cigar and basically showing the people how good he's living. What?
Why would you? I mean, that should spark an uprising, surely.
What the purpose for that is, I have no idea. That's what a world leader does when he's trying to start an uprising against himself. Venezuela's full collapse is going to come in the form of some kind of military takeover, a coup. One way or another, Maduro's going to end up in handcuffs. I almost guarantee.
That's crazy he released that video. Like, that is just insane. People are suffering and you're doing that. They need to get rid of him immediately.
Number 9, North Korea. North Korea is the world's most mysterious hermit kingdom, where propaganda is the only reliable export, and the citizens are forced to live in what's essentially a dystopian Truman Show. Remember that show with Jim Carrey? The cracks in this isolated fortress are becoming harder to plaster over, even with the government's trademark denials. Life in North Korea is Orwellian to the max. Citizens scrape by on
wow, look at all the buildings. They're like exactly the same.
meager rations while the leadership splurges on missile tests, statues of themselves, and things of that nature. The power outages, famine, and oppression are so routine they almost feel like someone's scheduling them. Yet somehow Kim Jong-un keeps convincing everyone that life outside of North Korea is worse. Spoiler alert, North Korea, it's not. Why the collapse? Brutal regime, international sanctions, and a populace that's increasingly aware that the rest of the world isn't actually a fiery hellscape. Now, from what I've read, it's almost like their biggest supporter, which is China and then followed by Russia, is kind of tired of North Korea themselves. And North Korea has been on the verge of collapsing for quite some time. I just think these days they're starting to get more information and the end is coming sooner than we think. But Kim Jong-un has such a grip on this country, he might be able to stay in power for a while, but I don't think so.
Yeah, man, like, don't they believe that he doesn't pee or poop as well? I actually kind of feel bad for the people that live in North Korea. Like, they're trapped. I think if they try and escape, they,
Number 8, Yemen. If war-torn were a brand, Yemen would be its brand ambassador. Years of civil war, foreign intervention, and a humanitarian crisis so dire that even the word catastrophe feels insufficient have left the country in shambles. Life in Yemen is like being trapped in a video game where the difficulty level is always set on impossible. Food shortages, constant bombings, and the collapse of the infrastructure means that every day is a struggle for survival. Yet amidst the rubble, Yemenis somehow maintain their dignity and hope, which is frankly superhuman at this point. Why the collapse? A toxic mix of a Saudi-Iranian proxy war, internal division, and international neglect. Yemen is basically the world's problem child, and no one wants to deal with it. They just want to keep it out of the way. They do have a government, barely, but I think it's on the verge of collapsing, probably within the next 3 years.
Yeah, like, aren't they involved in the whole, situation in the Middle East? I don't really want to talk about it because it's very, very, very inflammatory, but, the one that's been going on for since October 7, remember? Yeah, very, very messy, very sad.
Number 7, El Salvador. El Salvador is like the rebellious teenager of Central America. Small, crappy, and making questionable life choices. Its president has bet big on Bitcoin, which might just be the most El Salvadorian thing ever. Meanwhile, the country struggles with crime, poverty, and an economy that's about as reliable as a lottery ticket. Life in El Salvador feels like a mix of crypto bro dreams with real-world struggles. Sure, you can pay for everything with Bitcoin, but you gotta hope the Wi-Fi's working. It's pretty bad when you can't buy anything or pay anyone because the Wi-Fi's out. But outside the trendy cafes, most people are just trying to scrape by, dealing with gang violence and a government that treats democracy like an optional accessory. Why the collapse? Gang wars, economic mismanagement, and the fact that pinning your country's hopes on Bitcoin is the geopolitical equivalent of you only live once, or YOLO as the kids call it. If the experiment fails, El Salvador could end up as a cautionary tale for every country that ever thought, hey, what if we let Reddit run our economy? Most experts believe that El Salvador is going to collapse hard in the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, they bet big on Bitcoin. And I mean, recently, Bitcoin's done really well. I think it hit 100,000 a few days ago. It's come back down quite a bit since then. But I mean, he's laughing at them now. But if Bitcoin hits 1 million or whatever, I think the El Salvadorians will be the ones celebrating.
Number 6, Myanmar. Myanmar is like a beautiful house on fire, rich in culture and resources, but plagued by a military that's so power-hungry it makes Game of Thrones look like a fairy tale. The country has been sliding into chaos ever since the 2021 coup. This is a really strange country. Their capital city is a mess. I mean, not in a bad way. In a way that it is the same size, roughly, as London and Shanghai. London has almost 9 million people living in the city alone, with the metro area being almost 15 million, while Shanghai has a population of almost 25
Wow.
million. Naypyidaw is the capital city of Myanmar, and it has less than 1 million residents. They also have 10-lane highways. They have
Look at that. Wow. I've never seen a highway this empty, ever.
hotels that have thousands of rooms that have never been used. They have homes built but never used. If you work in the capital city, they give you a home.
beautiful.
The home has a colored roof depending on what ministry you work for. Maybe you're working for Parliament, that is actually a red roof. If you're working for the Ministry of Health, it's a blue roof. Green is the Ministry of Agriculture, and it goes on. It's just weird. If you go visit, about 90% of the people you see are actually workers because this city is manicured perfectly, like you went to Disneyland type of maintenance. Life in Myanmar feels like a dystopian mashup of protests, arrests, and internet blackouts. The people are fighting for democracy while the military responds with a level of brutality that suggests they read Orwell's 1984 and thought it was an instruction manual. Why the collapse? A coup that destroyed years of progress, widespread violence, and a population growing more desperate day by day. The military's iron grip is strong, but even iron rusts.
What a waste. It looks really beautiful. They should turn it into like a tourist destination, like Thailand, like Bangkok and stuff. Yeah, it's such a waste. Because I'm sure the weather's nice, but obviously they've got bigger problems and stuff than the weather and stuff. Argentina.
Number 5, Argentina. Argentina, the land of tango, world-class beef, and an economy that's been doing the cha-cha off the financial cliff for decades. Life in Argentina is a masterclass in adaptability. Inflation isn't just a problem, it's a way of life. Prices change faster than you can say Buenos Aires, and yet the Argentinians somehow manage to make every crisis look like a fiesta. Why the collapse? Well, chronic mismanagement, a debt crisis that could fill a library with overdue notices, and political leaders who keep solving problems by kicking them down the road. Argentina's economy feels like a telenovela, dramatic, unpredictable, and oddly addictive to watch. The real kicker? Argentina always pulls itself back from the brink, only to trip over its own policies a couple years later. At this point, the peso value is so low it could be used as monopoly money, and every election feels like a last-ditch effort to steer the ship away from an iceberg. Spoiler alert, it never works.
I would like to try an Argentinian steakhouse, to be fair. I've heard the steaks are really good. And some chimichurri.
Number 4, Libya. Libya is like a car with no driver, speeding down a hill towards a cliff. After the fall of Gaddafi, the country descended into chaos, with the rival factions fighting for control and the citizens caught in the crossfire. Now, if you don't remember the Arab Spring, it started in about 2011, and it was a series of anti-government protests, uprising, and armed rebellions that spread across much of the Arab world in the early 2010s. It began in Tunisia in January of 2011. The guy that had been running the country for 24 years stepped down. In February of 2011, same thing happened in Egypt. That guy had been running the country for 24 years as well. Then came Libya. Muammar Gaddafi had been running the show for 42 years, and it was a long, drawn-out thing where they started protesting, and there was all kinds of new laws put in place, and things came to a head when in September of 2011, they found a mass grave of protesters in Tripoli. On October 20th, 2011, Muammar Gaddafi decided to make a break for it and leave his capital city and his palace. Well, the rebels got a hold of him. It didn't end well. He died that same day. Now, Libya has been trying to pull it together since all this happened. I mean, it was kind of a mess for some time. Life in Libya is a paradox. It's a nation with vast oil wealth, yet most people live in fear and poverty. Militia checkpoints, kidnappings, and blackouts are part of daily life. Somehow, Libyans keep going, proving that even in a failed state, life finds a way. Why the collapse? Well, with no centralized government and a constant tug-of-war between rival factions, Libya is a prime candidate for total disintegration. Add foreign interference, and the collapse seems like a foregone conclusion.
I don't know why countries that have these, horrible despotic leaders don't just remove them. Like, I know that these leaders have, militaries and stuff like that, but the population outnumber these people like 1,000 to 1. Just get rid of them. I know it's easier said than done, but like, am I being too naive? Like, just don't put up with it.
Number 3, Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe is the poster child for how to ruin a perfectly good country. Once the breadbasket of Africa, it is now synonymous with hyperinflation, corruption, and economic despair. Thanks to Mugabe. He was the president of Zimbabwe from 1987 to 2017. At 93, they decided it was time for him to hang it up. He should have hung it up decades before, but you can't have everything, right? These days, life in Zimbabwe is a roller coaster of shortages, fuels, cash, electricity, you name it. There's a shortage. Yet people remain unbreakable. Cracking jokes.
I mean, not all Zimbabwe looks like this. This is not accurate.
And making do with what little they have. If sarcasm were a currency, Zimbabwe would be billionaires. Why the collapse? Decades of mismanagement, rapid corruption, and a government that treats its citizens like ATMs. Unless there's a miracle, Zimbabwe's future looks really bleak.
To be fair, yeah, Mugabe just destroyed. I mean, not destroyed, because you can never completely destroy a country, but he definitely set them back a lot. Like, it's just, yeah, but it does seem to be slowly on the upward trend.
Number 2, Syria. Syria is the textbook definition of a collapsed state. Years of civil war, foreign intervention, and a government that treats its people like cannon fodder have left the country in ruins. Life in Syria is a haunting mix of survival and sorrow. Bombed out cities, refugee camps, and a constant fear define everyday existence. Yet Syrians hold on to what little hope they can, proving that even in the darkest times, humanity endures. I mean, these people have been going through a lot for quite a while. Why the collapse? Well, the civil war seems endless, a fractured society and a government more interested in clinging to power than rebuilding. Syria's collapse is less looming and more already happening. Now, before we get to number one, there's an argument that the United States can be on this list. I don't think so. I mean, the United States has a horseshoe shoved up its butt or something. We always seem to pull out of whatever free fall we're in. As I was researching this, I found more and more experts think that the United States are one of the top 10 states that's about to collapse. I don't see it that way.
I do think late stage capitalism is happening right now, though. Not saying the US is going to collapse anytime soon, but I do think there's going to be some kind of economic shift down the road, because you're going to have a bigger and bigger number of people who just can't afford the basics. And, you know, if those people stop paying taxes and buying products, the economy just cannot sustain itself with the current model, if you know what I mean.
All right, before we get to number one, if you haven't subscribed, now's a good chance to subscribe. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button, give the video a big thumbs up, and leave me a comment. Tell me what you thought about this video. What country do you think should have been on the list? And I already know a whole bunch of you are going to put the United States, because the political system has turned us jaded against our own country. All right, on to number one.
Number one, what's number one? Russia.
And number one, Russia.
Russia's
Surprise,
huge,
surprise.
isn't
And I
it?
know a lot of people are going to say, what about Ukraine? Ukraine's pretty much collapsed, but Russia makes the list. Surprise, the Great Bear might be stumbling towards the abyss. Between its disastrous war in Ukraine, crippling sanctions, and a leadership that treats dissent like a personal insult, Russia is teetering. Life in Russia is increasingly a tale of two realities: the wealthy elite who live in gilded bubbles, and the average citizen scraping by under an increasingly authoritarian regime. The propaganda machine is working overtime, but cracks are starting to show, even in the motherland. Why the collapse? Overreach, economic isolation, and a population that might not stay silent forever. Russia's collapse would be dramatic, messy, and, let's be honest, highly entertaining for anyone watching from the sidelines. And there you have it, the grimly humorous tour of the world's most likely candidates for collapse. Let's just...
I mean, like, you might not like the Russian government, but the Russian people, you know, most of them are they're just following orders. They don't really have any authority here. So to say that, you know, it'd be entertaining to watch the country collapse is a little bit harsh.
Just hope we're wrong.
A little bit harsh.
I really hope we are. I'd like to see every country flourish and their citizens be happy. It'd be wonderful. Never seems to pan out that way. Maybe in Switzerland. But over the next few years, get some popcorn ready to go, just in case. We can watch it all on the news.
Man, what's the saying from Spider-Man, the first one with Tobey Maguire and Uncle Ben? With great power comes great responsibility. A lot of the leaders forget that. As soon as they assume office, it just seems that the corruption starts. They start looking at their citizens as cash machines, like Briggs said, the resources as their personal wealth. It's sad. It really is sad. And I feel like often people forget that they have the power. The power is in the people 100% of the time. No matter what, no matter how tall they build their walls, these politicians and leaders, no matter how big their palaces are, at the end of the day, the citizens outnumber them like 10,000 to 1, if not more. Like, a lot of these countries that are really suffering at the hands of their leaders, like North Korea and stuff like that, just get rid of them. But the brainwashing is just so effective and so strong that the people are almost like, you know, what's that phrase in The Sunken Place from that movie, Get Out? Like, just, you know, they're completely, you know, they just don't realize that they can completely change things if they want to. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.